I woke up to the sound of bubbling water and loud laughter coming from my dock. Two entitled sisters had set up their hot tub on my private property without asking. What happened next was pure karma. Before you watch full story, comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Picture this. You wake up expecting a peaceful morning by the lake. Instead, you find two strangers using your dock like it's their personal spa. That's exactly what happened to me last Tuesday. I stepped outside with my coffee and saw steam rising from my dock. There they were, Carol and Harper, two sisters in their 40s, sitting in a massive hot tub that they'd somehow dragged onto my property. The tub was huge, probably 8 feet across, perched on my dock like a hippo on a diving board. These women were both large, clearly twins, with the same pudgy arms draped over the sides and the same smug expressions on their round faces. Carol wore a shiny blue swimming dress that looked like it was about to burst. Harper had squeezed herself into a purple swimsuit that clung to her like plastic wrap. They had plastic champagne glasses, a floating speaker, and enough attitude to sink a battleship. My dock was groaning under their weight. Every bubble in that tub sounded like a ticking time bomb waiting to collapse my carefully built wooden platform. I cleared my throat loudly. Nothing. I stepped closer and spoke up. "Excuse me," I called out. "You put a hot tub on my dock." Carol cracked one eye open and gave me a slow, lazy look like I was the one trespassing. Harper didn't even bother turning her head. "Morning," Carol said with a grin too wide to be friendly. "Hope we're not disturbing you." I blinked in disbelief. "You put a hot tub on my dock." "Oh, this." Carol gestured around like the tub had floated there magically. "Yeah, we figured it was going to waste. Nobody was using it. You should really thank us for bringing life to the place." Harper chuckled without opening her eyes. "It's basically public anyway. You don't own the lake." "I own the dock," I said firmly. Carol waved me off like I was an annoying fly. "Tomato, tomato. It's a floating rectangle. Relax." I stood there stunned. These women had literally stolen my dock and were acting like I was the problem. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to call the police immediately. But I decided to try reasoning with them first. Big mistake. Let me rewind and tell you how this nightmare began. I bought this lake house 3 years ago after saving for a decade. It was my dream, remote, quiet, surrounded by tall pine trees and the kind of neighbors who minded their own business. The house came with a small dock that had been damaged in a storm. I spent 2 months rebuilding that dock myself. Every weekend I was out there with my tools, measuring planks, checking weight limits, making sure everything was perfect and up to code. It wasn't just a dock to me, it was my morning coffee spot, my fishing platform, my place to watch sunsets and think about life. For 3 years it had been peaceful. My neighbors were mostly retirees and young families who kept to themselves. We'd wave from our porches, maybe chat about the weather, but nobody bothered anyone else. Then last week, everything changed. A white SUV came barreling down our quiet gravel road like a tornado with wheels. It skidded into the driveway of the rental house 2 doors down, music blasting, dust flying everywhere. Out stepped Carol and Harper, two sisters who looked like they'd escaped from a reality TV show about entitled tourists. They were loud, they were large, and they were definitely not the quiet lake people I was used to. From day one they made their presence known. They set up lawn chairs facing the lake, cranked their Bluetooth speaker to maximum volume, and started blasting what sounded like 90s club music mixed with terrible karaoke. By the end of their first day, they'd already thrown beer cans into the woods and left a pile of chip bags near the community mailbox. When I gave them a polite wave, they stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That evening, I was grilling dinner on my deck when they wandered over uninvited. Carol introduced herself by grabbing a sausage off my plate without asking. "Hey neighbor," she said with her mouth full. "We're the new lake queens." Harper laughed like it was the funniest joke ever told. "We were wondering if we could use that dock of yours. It's closer to the good sun angle." I blinked. "It's private property." Harper tilted her head like a confused dog. "But you're not using it right now." "I'm going to be," I replied. They exchanged glances, shrugged, and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. 2 days after our first encounter, I woke up to a rumbling sound that definitely didn't belong near a peaceful lake. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a portable gas generator sitting in the grass right at the edge of my property line. Carol and Harper were dragging extension cords across my lawn toward the dock like they owned the place. I threw on a jacket and hurried outside. "What the hell is this?" "Our new spa setup," Carol announced like she was revealing a game show prize. "We found this gorgeous hot tub on Facebook Marketplace. Got it for a steal." And since we don't have dock access at our rental, Harper added with a grin, we figured we'd borrow yours. I stared at them in disbelief. I already told you. The dock is private. It's not for communal use. Harper scoffed. Relax, Captain Rules. It's not like we're moving in permanently. Just a soak now and then. You act like we're draining your life force or something. You're setting up a gas generator on a wooden dock right above water, I snapped. You could blow yourselves up. Carol rolled her eyes. Then you'd get your dock back. Problem solved. And just like that, they turned away and kept setting up their death trap. By that evening, the hot tub was filled, steaming, and in full operation. Colored lights glowed beneath the surface. A plastic flamingo bobbed on the edge. They blasted music, played cards, and shouted across the lake at confused paddle boarders who had no idea what they were looking at. I called the sheriff's office to file a noise complaint. They said they'd send someone out when they had time. No one ever came. The next morning, a neighbor's 8-year-old son came down to the water with his fishing rod. Harper splashed water at him and yelled, "Back off, guppy boy. This ain't your swimming hole." The kid ran home crying. That was my breaking point. I'm not a confrontational person by nature. I believe in trying to solve problems with communication first. So I decided to approach the situation like a reasonable adult. I spent an hour researching dock safety regulations, liability laws, and fire codes. I printed everything out, highlighted the important parts, and put it all in a waterproof folder with a polite note attached. The note said, "Hi. I wanted to share some important safety information about dock usage. The weight limits and electrical guidelines are for everyone's protection. Thanks for understanding. Your neighbor." I even drew a little smiley face at the bottom. The next morning, Carol and Harper were already soaking in their tub when I walked down with my folder. Carol had on oversized sunglasses and was sipping from a pineapple-shaped cup. Harper was filming another video for what I'd learned was her Instagram account called Lake Queens Living. "Hey there, neighbor," Carol chirped without looking at me. I held up the folder. "I brought something I think you need to read." "Oh, is it an apology letter?" she asked, grinning. Harper snorted. "He's probably suing us for relaxing too hard." "It's about safety," I said calmly. "That dock wasn't built to hold this much weight, especially with 2 people in it. If the planks give out, you could end up in the lake or worse." Carol took the folder with exaggerated care and started flipping through it dramatically. "Oh wow, this looks super serious," she said, mouthing the words slowly like she was reading a foreign language. "Look, Harper," he used bold text. "He means business." Harper rolled her eyes. "Ugh, we're not dumb, okay? We know what we're doing and we're not hurting anyone." "You're damaging my dock," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "And if something goes wrong, I'm the one who'll be held responsible. That generator is a fire risk, not to mention you're using private property without permission." Carol dropped my carefully prepared folder directly into the hot tub water. The papers immediately started dissolving. "Oops," she said with fake innocence. I watched my research sink into their bubbling cauldron. "Look, I get that you're on vacation, but you need to find another spot for this." "We get it," Carol said, leaning back like a queen on a throne. "You're the dock boss. But you really need to unclench. Ever heard of lake life? This is it, baby. Bubbles, sun, and a little music therapy. You should try it sometime." As I turned and walked away, I could hear them cackling behind me, clinking their plastic glasses together like villains in a cartoon. I realized then that talking to these women was like arguing with a clogged drain, loud, messy, and guaranteed to back up on you. That night, things escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. They invited guests. Not just 1 or 2 people, at least 6 additional adults showed up in swimsuits, carrying coolers and pool floats. My quiet lake had turned into spring break. I watched from my living room window as person after person climbed onto my dock. One guy actually tried to use my kayak as a ladder to get into the hot tub. The dock was swaying and groaning under all that weight like it was about to snap in half. They brought soap. Actual bubble bath soap that foamed over the edges and spread across the lake like an environmental disaster. At one point, someone started a karaoke session with a waterproof microphone. I called the police again. This time they said they'd send someone when available. Translation: never. The party went until 2 a.m. By the time they finally stumbled back to their rental house, my dock looked like a hurricane had hit it. Empty wine bottles everywhere, wet towels draped over my railings, food wrappers floating in the water. My kayak was half submerged and tied to the hot tub with a bungee cord like some kind of bizarre water taxi. The next morning, I surveyed the damage and made a decision. Peaceful negotiation was officially off the table. I'm not the type of person who acts on emotion alone. If I was going to solve this problem, I needed to be smart about it. I spent the entire afternoon gathering intelligence. I found the hot tub's model number from a photo I'd sneakily taken and looked up the manual online. According to the manufacturer, it needed a flat, solid foundation, not a wooden surface that could sway or flex. The recommended weight limit per square foot was exactly half of what my dock could safely handle. These women were literally risking collapse every time they got in. I checked the power specifications. The hot tub's heating unit drew more electrical power than that little gas generator could safely provide. One overloaded wire, one spark near that gas tank, and the whole setup could go up in flames. I contacted the homeowners association, but they told me that since the sisters were renting from a private owner outside HOA boundaries, there wasn't much they could do. I filed another complaint with the county inspector's office, this time including photos and detailed safety concerns. They said someone would follow up in a few weeks. I didn't have weeks. At the rate they were going, they'd either burn down my dock or collapse it completely before any official help arrived. That's when I realized I needed to take matters into my own hands. Not with violence, not with property damage, but with a lesson in basic physics. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting gravity and nature do what they do best. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. Sometimes entitled people only learn through consequences, and these two had ignored every reasonable attempt at compromise. My plan was simple, legal, and absolutely foolproof. I waited until Tuesday morning. I'd been watching their routine for a week now, and Tuesdays were always their grocery run. They left around 10 a.m. in their white SUV, music thumping through the open windows, and they were usually gone for at least 2 hours. The moment their car disappeared around the bend, I put my plan into action. First, I walked down to the dock and carefully unplugged the generator. I wasn't stealing it or damaging it, just disconnecting their power source. I coiled the extension cables neatly and left them right where they could find them. Next came the crucial part. The hot tub was secured to my dock with 3 heavy-duty anchor straps. I removed 2 of them completely and loosened the third one just enough to allow some movement, but not enough to cause immediate detachment. The lake current wasn't strong, but it was persistent. With the right positioning and just a little help from physics, I knew that tub would start to drift the moment there was any significant movement inside it. I checked the wooden planks beneath the tub one more time. They were groaning under the weight, but they'd hold barely. Finally, I took out a permanent marker and wrote a simple message on a waterproof sign. Dock undergoing maintenance. Use at your own risk. I planted it firmly in the soil right at the entrance to the dock. It was a warning, a courtesy, and the perfect setup for what was about to happen. By noon, I was back on my porch with a cup of coffee, waiting for the show to begin. Carol and Harper got back from their shopping trip right on schedule. I watched from my kitchen window as they unloaded bags of junk food and what looked like enough alcohol to stock a small bar. Ugh, did someone move our stuff? Harper called out, her arms full of takeout bags. The jets feel different, Carol replied, already stepping toward the tub. They didn't notice the maintenance sign. They didn't see the unplugged generator. They completely missed the fact that only one anchor rope was still holding their floating spa to my dock. Whatever, Carol shrugged, already stripping down to her swimsuit. I need this soak. Shopping was a nightmare. No one in this town has decent plus-size swimwear. Harper dropped into the tub with a heavy splash that sent water sloshing over the edges. Did you post our new spa shot yet? Yeah, Carol replied, settling into the bubbling water. #Lake Queens, #living our best life. They toasted with invisible glasses and leaned back, eyes closed, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. I sat on my porch with my coffee, watching through the slats of my railing. The lake was perfectly calm, the air was still, and every detail was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. Then, as if nudged by an invisible hand, the hot tub shifted. Just an inch at first. Then another. The lake current, lazy but persistent, began to tug at the loosened tub. The single remaining rope strained against its knot. Harper blinked and sat up slightly. Hey, are we moving? Carol frowned without opening her eyes. I don't think so. You're being paranoid. But they were moving. Slowly, gracefully, inevitably moving away from the safety of my dock and toward the open water of the lake. Another inch. Then another. The current caught the tub more firmly now. The last rope stretched tight, creaking under the tension. Harper looked toward the dock, then back at Carol. I swear we were closer to the chairs a second ago. You're imagining things, Carol waved a dismissive hand. Just relax and enjoy the bubbles. But I could see what was coming. The moment I'd been waiting for. The inevitable conclusion to their week of entitled behavior. The rope snapped. The moment that last anchor rope gave way, everything changed. The hot tub, now completely free from my dock, began to drift slowly but steadily toward the center of the lake. Carol and Harper were so relaxed, so confident in their stolen paradise, that they didn't notice for almost 30 seconds. Then Harper screamed, "Carol, we're floating. What the hell is happening?" Carol's eyes shot open. She looked around wildly, water sloshing as she tried to sit up. "Oh my God, we're not attached anymore. Where's the rope? Where's the rope?" They scrambled like two panicked seals, water splashing everywhere, plastic cups flying through the air. Harper reached desperately for the edge of my dock, but they were already too far away. Her fingertips barely grazed the wooden planks. "Turn it off," Carol shrieked. "Turn off the jets." "I can't," Harper yelled back. "It's not plugged in anymore." The tub bobbed another few feet away from shore. Then a few more. The lake current, which had seemed so gentle and peaceful all these years, was now carrying them steadily toward the deeper water. Carol tried to paddle with a foam kickboard, but it only succeeded in spinning them in slow circles. Harper attempted to use a pool noodle as an oar, splashing frantically and accomplishing absolutely nothing. Their panicked voices echoed across the previously quiet lake. From nearby docks, early morning kayakers and fishermen began to notice the unusual sight of two large women floating helplessly in a hot tub in the middle of the water. I didn't smile. Not yet. But inside, a warm feeling of satisfaction was growing. For the first time in a week, they were finally off my dock and completely out of control of the situation. And the lake was deciding where they went next. Word spreads fast on a small lake, especially when something this bizarre is happening. The first witnesses were a pair of teenagers in a paddle boat who had been fishing near the far shore. They stopped rowing and stared in complete disbelief as the massive hot tub glided past them like some kind of escaped UFO. One of the boys pulled out his phone. Click. Record. "Help us." Carol waved both arms frantically. "We're not supposed to be out here." The teenager called back, grinning from ear to ear, "You look pretty comfortable though." More phones came out. A morning kayaker changed course to get a closer look, circling them like a curious shark and snapping photos. An elderly couple on a pontoon boat slowed down to watch, the woman practically crying with laughter. "I've seen everything now," she wheezed to her husband. Two ladies floating around in a hot tub like it's the most normal thing in the world. Harper's face was turning red with a mixture of rage and embarrassment. "This isn't funny. Someone get us a rope." "You got a rope?" a fisherman yelled back from his small motorboat. "You're floating in a hot tub. You're basically in a giant bathtub with legs." Carol grabbed the decorative flamingo float and started trying to use it as a paddle. It splashed uselessly against the water, achieving nothing except getting her more soaked and making the spectacle even more ridiculous. "We need to call for help," Harper said, pulling her phone from a waterproof pouch around her neck. Her thumbs fumbled across the screen as the tub continued to spin slowly in the current. "I've got no bars," she announced like it was a national emergency. "No signal at all." Carol's phone had already taken a dive into the tub during their initial panic. I watched her stare mournfully into the bubbling water where it had disappeared. "I dropped mine," she mumbled. "It's somewhere at the bottom." Harper slumped against the side of the tub, soaking wet and furious. "This is all your fault. You were supposed to double-check the anchor lines. And you were supposed to be smart enough not to get in a floating hot tub." Carol shot back. They started fighting like two wet cats in a bathtub, shoving and splashing until Harper nearly slipped under the surface. For one terrifying second, she disappeared beneath the foam, but came up gasping and cursing. The tub was now a good 50 feet from my dock and still drifting. The steam had long since disappeared in the open air, and the water was cooling rapidly without the heater running. Their shouts were turning from angry to genuinely panicked as they realized how far from shore they were getting. By now, at least a dozen people around the lake had stopped what they were doing to watch the show. Kayakers, fishermen, early morning joggers on the shore, everyone was pulling out their phones. I could see the exact moment when someone started live streaming. A young woman on a stand-up paddleboard was clearly talking to her phone camera while pointing at the floating disaster. "Okay guys, you're not going to believe what I'm seeing right now," she was saying, though I couldn't hear her words from my porch. "Two ladies are literally floating around the lake in a hot tub, and they're completely freaking out." The comments were probably already pouring in. Hearts, crying, laughing emojis, shares to friends who wouldn't believe it without video proof. Carol and Harper had no idea they were becoming internet famous, but I could see it happening in real time. Phones everywhere, All pointed at their increasingly desperate situation. Harper tried to cover her face with her hands. Everyone's recording us. Make them stop. How exactly am I supposed to make them stop? Carol snapped back. We're floating in the middle of a lake in a hot tub. Of course they're recording. A pontoon boat full of college kids had joined the growing audience. One of them had what looked like a professional camera with a big lens. They were keeping a respectful distance but clearly documenting every moment. This is going straight to TikTok, one of the girls on the boat called out cheerfully. Harper looked like she wanted to sink to the bottom of the lake and disappear forever. Carol just kept trying to paddle with increasingly ridiculous objects. A pool noodle, a plastic cup, even her own hands. Nothing worked. The lake current was gentle but unstoppable, carrying them farther and farther from any hope of reaching shore on their own. That's when I heard the sound of an approaching motor. The lake patrol was finally coming to save them. The lake patrol boat appeared around the bend like a white knight coming to save two very wet, very embarrassed damsels in distress. The officer driving it looked more confused than concerned as he approached the floating hot tub. He cut his engine and drifted closer, shaking his head in obvious disbelief. Through his megaphone he called out, "You ladies need assistance?" "Yes." Harper screamed, her voice cracking with relief and exhaustion. "Get us off this death bucket. We've been floating for 20 minutes. The patrol officer was clearly trying not to laugh. His voice came through the megaphone with barely controlled amusement. "Ma'am, how exactly did you end up in the middle of the lake in a hot tub?" "It broke loose from the dock," Carol yelled, pointing vaguely toward shore. "We were just trying to relax." "Aha," the officer replied. "And whose dock was that?" Silence. Carol and Harper exchanged glances, probably realizing for the first time that they were about to have to explain their week of trespassing to a law enforcement officer. The rescue itself was almost as entertaining as the original disaster. The officer tossed them a thick rope, which Harper immediately fumbled and dropped into the water. Carol managed to grab it on the second try and loop it around one of the tub's handholds. Slowly, very slowly, the patrol boat began towing them back toward shore. Their return journey was anything but dignified. The hot tub bobbed and swayed behind the boat like an oversized fishing lure, with Carol and Harper clinging to the sides like shipwreck survivors. The entire lake was watching now. People had gathered on docks and shorelines, some applauding mockingly, others just shaking their heads in amazement. The college kids on the pontoon boat were following alongside, still filming everything. As they approached my dock, I could see both women were shivering. The water in the tub had gone completely cold and they were soaked to the bone. Their earlier confidence and entitlement had been replaced by pure humiliation. The patrol officer managed to maneuver the tub close enough to my dock for them to climb out. Carol went first, stumbling across the wet planks in her waterlogged swimming dress. Harper followed, limping slightly and leaving puddles with every step. They looked like two drowned cats who'd been pulled out of a swimming pool. I met them at the edge of my property, arms crossed, watching as they dripped their way across my lawn. The hot tub was now sitting at an angle, half-drained and clearly damaged from its unexpected voyage. Carol stomped up to me, water squishing out of her shoes with every step. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black streaks, and her perfectly styled hair hung in wet clumps around her face. "You think this is funny?" she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. I looked her straight in the eye. "Actually, yeah. A little bit." Harper joined the confrontation, purple swimsuit still dripping and her face red with anger and embarrassment. "You unplugged our generator. You loosened the ropes. You set us adrift on purpose." I nodded calmly. "I warned you multiple times that the dock wasn't stable. I even posted a sign about maintenance. You chose to ignore all the warnings. You sabotaged us." Carol shrieked. "I unplugged an electrical device that was illegally connected to my property," I replied evenly. "And I removed unsafe anchoring from my dock that was exceeding weight limits. Everything I did was to protect my property and prevent accidents." The patrol officer had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. He approached our group, notepad in hand. "Excuse me, ladies," he said to Carol and Harper. "Did you have permission to use this gentleman's dock?" Silence. Both women looked at each other, then at the ground. "Well," the officer pressed. "It's basically public property," Harper muttered. "No ma'am, it's not," the officer replied. "Private docks require permission from the owner. Did you ask permission?" More silence. Carol finally spoke up. "We figured he wasn't using it." The officer turned to me. "Sir, did you give these ladies permission to install a hot tub on your dock?" "Absolutely not," I said. I asked them multiple times to remove it. I even provided safety documentation about weight limits and fire hazards. The officer was writing everything down. And the generator? Unpermitted electrical installation on private property, I explained. Gas generator running extension cords across my lawn without authorization. Carol and Harper were looking increasingly uncomfortable as they realized how much trouble they might be in. "You'll pay for this," Carol said weakly, but her earlier confidence was completely gone. "You're right," I replied with a smile. "I will pay for this." With peace and quiet and the glorious absence of entitled trespassers using my property as their personal spa. By now we had quite an audience. Several neighbors had wandered over to see what all the commotion was about. The college kids had beached their pontoon boat and were watching from the shoreline, phones still recording. Mrs. Peterson from 3 houses down was shaking her head in disgust. "I've been watching this nonsense all week," she told the patrol officer. "Loud music at all hours, trash everywhere, complete disrespect for everyone around here." Mr. Johnson, the retired firefighter who lived across the cove, chimed in. "That generator setup was a disaster waiting to happen. Surprised they didn't blow themselves up." Carol and Harper looked around at all the disapproving faces and started to realize just how outnumbered they were. Every single neighbor was on my side. "We're vacation renters." Harper protested. "We have rights." "You have the right to use the property you're renting," the patrol officer explained patiently. "You don't have the right to use other people's property without permission." One of the college kids spoke up from the beach. "Yo, this is already going viral. Someone posted it in the Lake Life Facebook group and it's got like 500 shares already." Harper's face went pale. "Viral? Dude, you're internet famous," another student called out. "Hot tub Karen sisters take unexpected cruise. People are making memes." I could see the exact moment when the full reality of their situation hit them. Not only had they been humiliated in front of the entire lake community, but their embarrassment was being broadcast to the world. Carol grabbed Harper's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." But the patrol officer wasn't done with them yet. "Ladies, before you go anywhere, we need to discuss a few things," the officer said, flipping to a new page in his notepad. "What kind of things?" Carol asked nervously. "Well, there's the matter of trespassing on private property, unauthorized electrical connections, potential environmental damage from soap and chemicals in the lake, noise violations, and—" He paused, looking at the damaged hot tub, "possible abandonment of property." Harper's eyes went wide. "Abandonment? We're not abandoning anything. Ma'am, that hot tub is sitting on someone else's property, damaged and inoperable. Unless you remove it immediately, it becomes abandoned property that the landowner can dispose of as he sees fit." I hadn't thought about that angle, but the officer was absolutely right. "How long do they have to remove it?" I asked. "Typically 24 hours for something this size," he replied. "After that, you can have it towed at their expense." Carol and Harper exchanged panicked glances. The hot tub was clearly too damaged to move easily, and they had no way to transport something that size. "This is harassment," Carol sputtered. "No ma'am, this is the law," the officer replied calmly. "You can't install equipment on someone else's property without permission, especially when it creates safety hazards." He turned to me. "Sir, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to see them face real consequences for their behavior. But another part of me just wanted them gone forever. "Not if they remove everything by tomorrow morning and leave," I said. "But if they cause any more problems, I'll file every charge you'll let me." The officer nodded and handed Carol a business card. "Ladies, I suggest you contact a towing company today. And in the future, maybe ask permission before using other people's property." As Carol and Harper skulked back to their rental house to figure out how to remove a broken hot tub, I decided to check what was happening online. I pulled out my phone and searched for "hot tub lake drift" on social media. What I found exceeded my wildest expectations. The college kid hadn't been exaggerating. Multiple videos of the incident were already spreading across Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. The one that really took off was entitled "Karen Sisters Steal Dock for Hot Tub Instant Karma Strikes." The comments were pure gold. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, face with tears of joy." Imagine being so entitled you think you can just steal someone's dock. The way they're arguing while floating away, skull skull skull. This is the content I signed up for. Plot twist, the lake said "No Karens allowed." Someone had already made it into a meme with the caption, "When you try to steal someone's dock but physics has other plans." Another person created a GIF of the moment the ropes snapped with the text, "Consequences have entered the chat." By evening, the original video had over 50,000 views and was climbing fast. Local news stations were starting to pick it up. Someone had even created a parody song called "Hot Tub Heroes, Gone Wrong." But the best part was reading the comments from other people who dealt with similar situations. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories about entitled neighbors, vacation renters who thought they owned everything, and creative ways they'd solved the problems. I felt like I'd accidentally become the hero of every property owner who'd ever dealt with boundary-crossing neighbors. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a tow truck backing down toward the lake. Carol and Harper had apparently spent all night and a significant amount of money arranging for the hot tub's removal. I watched from my kitchen window as three burly guys with a specialized trailer worked to extract the damaged tub from my dock. It took them almost 2 hours and some serious equipment to get it loaded. Carol emerged from the rental house as they were finishing up. She looked like she hadn't slept at all, hair disheveled, no makeup, wearing yesterday's clothes. She supervised the removal with the defeated air of someone who knew they'd lost completely. Harper didn't even come outside. I later learned from Mrs. Peterson that she'd been on the phone all morning with their insurance company, trying to explain how their hot tub had ended up damaged in the middle of a lake. The tow truck driver approached me as they were getting ready to leave. "That was one hell of a mess," he said, shaking his head. "Lady says it just broke loose from the dock." "That true?" I smiled. "Well, the anchor ropes weren't properly secured for the weight load. Physics did the rest." He laughed. "Physics is a harsh teacher. Bet they learned their lesson." As the truck pulled away with the remains of their floating spa, Carol gave me one last hate-filled glare. But there was no fight left in her. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who'd been completely outmaneuvered and publicly humiliated for their own bad behavior. The generator was gone too, loaded into the back of their SUV along with all their other lake accessories. Pool floats, speakers, coolers, lawn chairs, everything they'd spread across my property like they owned it. By noon, my dock was mine again. The first thing I did was walk out to the end of my dock and just stand there in the silence. No bubbling hot tub. No screaming sisters. No terrible music echoing across the water. Just the gentle lap of waves against the wooden posts and the sound of birds singing in the pine trees. It was perfect. I spent the afternoon repairing the minor damage to the dock. A few loose screws, some scuff marks from where they dragged the tub around. Nothing major, but I wanted everything back to its original condition. While I worked, neighbors kept stopping by to congratulate me and share their own stories about Carol and Harper's week of terror. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd been dealing with their entitled behavior. Mrs. Peterson told me they'd been dumping their garbage in other people's bins without asking. Mr. Johnson said they'd been letting their rental car leak oil all over the community parking area. The family with the little boy who'd been splashed said Harper had actually yelled at their daughter for riding her bike too loudly past their rental. "Good riddance" seemed to be the universal sentiment. That evening, I sat on my dock with a beer and watched the sunset paint the lake gold and orange. For the first time in a week, I could actually hear the water lapping against the shore instead of generators rumbling and sisters shrieking. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. The viral videos were still spreading, and people were tagging me in comments after someone figured out my identity. Most of the messages were supportive, people calling me a hero, asking for advice about their own problem neighbors, sharing similar stories of creative justice. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of car doors slamming and luggage being thrown around. Carol and Harper were packing up to leave 3 days early. I watched from my porch as they loaded their rainbow suitcases and leopard print bags into their white SUV. No more loud music. No more shouting at each other. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who just wanted to escape as quickly as possible. Harper emerged from the rental house wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low over her face, clearly trying to avoid being recognized by anyone who might have seen the viral videos. Carol came out last, carrying what looked like a laptop bag. She paused by their car and looked across the lake one final time. For just a moment, I thought she might storm over for one last confrontation. Instead, she just shook her head and got in the passenger seat. They drove away without a word to anyone, their SUV disappearing around the bend like they'd never been there at all. The silence they left behind was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in weeks. Later that day, I decided to install a new sign at the entrance to my dock. Not the temporary maintenance warning I'd used during the operation, but something more permanent. I carved it myself from a piece of weathered oak, using my woodworking tools to create something that looked like it belonged by the lake. The message was simple but clear. Private property dock owner permission required. Unauthorized hot tubs will be set adrift. I painted the letters in dark green and sealed the whole thing to withstand weather. Then I mounted it on a sturdy post right where anyone approaching the dock would have to see it. Mrs. Peterson came by while I was installing it and burst out laughing when she read the text. Unauthorized hot tubs will be set adrift, she repeated, shaking her head. You should trademark that phrase. I bet half the lake property owners around here would want that same sign. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, 3 different neighbors asked me where I'd gotten the sign and if I could make them similar ones. Apparently, the hot tub incident had inspired a lot of people to be more proactive about protecting their property boundaries. A week later, the viral videos had reached over 500,000 views across various platforms. Local news stations had picked up the story, though they kept my identity anonymous and focused on the unique property dispute resolution. Someone had created an entire series of memes using screenshots from the videos. My personal favorite showed Carol and Harper floating away with the caption, "When you try to Karen someone but the lake says, not today." A few people tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I'd endangered their lives or been unnecessarily cruel. But the overwhelming response was supportive. Most people understood that I'd tried reasonable approaches first and only resorted to creative consequences when nothing else worked. The best comments came from other property owners sharing their own stories. "This guy is a legend. I wish I'd thought of this when my neighbors decided my pool was basically communal." Sometimes entitled people only learn through natural consequences. Physics doesn't care about your feelings. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. These sisters learned a valuable lesson about respecting other people's property. Just when I thought the story was over, life had one more surprise in store. 2 months after the hot tub incident, I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning when I heard a familiar sound, a car door slamming followed by loud, obnoxious voices. My heart sank. It couldn't be. But it was. Carol and Harper were back, standing next to a different rental car and arguing loudly in the driveway of the same rental house. Apparently, they'd booked another vacation despite their previous humiliation. I watched from my kitchen window as they unloaded their luggage. Same leopard print suitcases, same attitude, but this time they kept glancing nervously toward my dock. Within an hour, Harper was knocking on my door. "Listen," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We wanted to clear the air about what happened before." I crossed my arms and waited. "We realized maybe we got a little carried away with the whole hot tub situation," she continued. "And we were wondering if we could maybe use your dock for some light sunbathing? We brought our own chairs this time." I stared at her in disbelief. After everything that had happened, after being humiliated in front of the entire internet, they were back asking to use my property again. "No," I said simply. "But we're being reasonable this time," Harper protested. "Just chairs. No electrical equipment. No hot tubs." "The answer is no," I repeated. "And it will always be no." Harper's face started turning red. "You can't hold a grudge forever. We said we were sorry." "Actually, you didn't say sorry," I pointed out. "You said you got carried away. That's not an apology, that's an excuse." She stomped back to the rental house, and within minutes Carol was marching over. "My sister tried to be nice," Carol said, her old entitled attitude fully restored. "But you're being completely unreasonable. It's just a dock." "It's my dock," I replied calmly. "We looked into it," she said with a smug smile. "Technically, the water rights extend to the high water mark. We could set up chairs in the shallow water right next to your dock, and there's nothing you could do about it." I smiled back. "You're absolutely right. The water is public. Feel free to set up chairs in the lake." She seemed surprised that I'd agreed so easily. "Good. That's exactly what we'll do." "Great," I said. "I'll make sure to get some good video of it." The mention of video made her face go pale. The viral humiliation was clearly still fresh in her memory. "You wouldn't dare," she said weakly. "Try me," I replied. The next morning, Carol and Harper attempted to follow through on their threat. They carried 2 lawn chairs down to the water's edge and tried to set them up in the shallow area next to my dock. The first problem was that the lake bottom was muddy and uneven. The chairs immediately started sinking into the soft sediment. The second problem was that the water was about 3 feet deep even at the shallow edge. To sit in the chairs, they had to wade in up to their waist. The third problem was that it was early spring, and the lake water was absolutely freezing. I watched from my porch as they struggled with their brilliant plan. Carol managed to get her chair positioned but immediately shrieked when the cold water hit her legs. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, trying to sit down and immediately jumping back up. It's like ice. Harper's chair had already toppled over and was floating away. She was trying to chase it while maintaining her balance in the muddy bottom. Within 10 minutes they were both soaked, shivering and covered in lake mud up to their knees. The chairs were ruined and they looked absolutely miserable. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "How's that water chair setup working out for you?" I called down to them. "Shut up," Carol screamed, but her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. They gave up after 20 minutes, dragging their waterlogged chairs back to shore and leaving muddy footprints all the way to their rental house. This time, I decided to be proactive about the social media aspect. Instead of waiting for someone else to post the video, I created my own TikTok account and posted the water chair footage myself. I titled it, "Karen Sisters Return for Round 2, Water Chair Edition." The caption read, "Remember the hot tub sisters? They're back and trying to set up lawn chairs in freezing lake water. Some people never learn." Man facepalming. The video went viral even faster than the original hot tub incident. People were amazed that Carol and Harper had returned and even more amazed that they'd tried such a ridiculous workaround. The comments were brutal. They came back for more? Face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy. Imagine being this entitled that you get humiliated internationally and still come back for seconds. Ma'am, this is a lake, not a swimming pool. The audacity is truly impressive. Plot twist, the lake said "No Karens allowed" again. But the best part was that people started sharing the video with the caption, "When you don't learn from your mistakes." It became a perfect example of how some people refuse to accept consequences and just keep making the same errors over and over. Emboldened by the failure of their water chair plan, Carol and Harper decided to try a different approach. They contacted the rental property owner and complained that I was harassing them and preventing them from enjoying the lake. The property owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me that afternoon. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, "but I have these tenants claiming you're being unreasonable about lake access. They want me to talk to you about sharing dock space." I explained the entire history to Mrs. Rodriguez, the original hot tub incident, the viral videos, the property damage, and now their return with continued demands to use my private dock. "Oh my God," Mrs. Rodriguez said when I finished. "These are the hot tub people. I saw those videos. I had no idea they were renting my property. They didn't mention that when they booked the return trip?" I asked. "They booked under different names," she said. "I'm looking at the reservation now, and they used Harper's husband's name instead of their own. They deliberately hid their identity." Mrs. Rodriguez was not happy about being deceived. "I run a respectable rental business. I can't have tenants who are internet famous for trespassing and property damage." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm terminating their rental agreement," she said firmly. "They lied on their application, they're harassing neighbors, and they're damaging my reputation. They'll be gone by tomorrow." The next morning, Carol and Harper were loading their suitcases again, but this time they were furious instead of defeated. Carol stormed over to my house one last time. "This is all your fault," she screamed. "You got us kicked out. You ruined our vacation." "I didn't get you kicked out," I replied calmly. "You got yourselves kicked out by lying to the property owner and continuing to harass neighbors. We have rights," Harper yelled from the driveway. "You have the right to rent property legally and use it respectfully," I called back. "You don't have the right to trespass, lie, or demand access to other people's private property." Carol's face was bright red with rage. "You think you're so smart with your viral videos and your stupid signs. But this isn't over." "Actually, it is over," I said. "And if you come back again, I'll make sure the whole internet knows about it." The threat of more viral humiliation seemed to deflate her completely. She turned and walked back to their car without another word. As they drove away for the second time, I noticed Harper was crying in the passenger seat. Maybe the reality of their behavior was finally sinking in. Word spread quickly around the lake community about Carol and Harper's return and subsequent ejection. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Mrs. Peterson brought over a bottle of wine to celebrate their departure. The nerve of those women coming back after everything they did. Good riddance. Mr. Johnson stopped by to check that I was okay. "Some people just never learn," he said, shaking his head. "But you handled it perfectly." That video of them trying to sit in the freezing water was hilarious. Even the college kids who had filmed the original incident messaged me on social media. "Dude, we can't believe they came back. You're like the lake's unofficial bouncer now." The rental property owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, sent me a formal apology letter and assured me that she would be screening her tenants more carefully in the future. She also offered to put my phone number on file as a contact for any future property issues. The second round of videos garnered even more attention than the first. News outlets picked up the story of the Karen sisters who wouldn't give up, and I started getting interview requests from local TV stations. I turned down most of them, preferring to let the videos speak for themselves. But I did agree to one phone interview with a property rights advocacy group that was using my situation as an example of how homeowners can protect their boundaries without resorting to violence or legal action. The key, I told them, is documentation, patience, and sometimes letting natural consequences teach the lesson you can't. The phrase "unauthorized hot tubs will be set adrift" had become a meme in its own right. People were making t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even garden signs with the slogan. I started getting royalty checks from merchandise sales that I hadn't even authorized. 6 months after the second incident, my lake life had returned to its perfect routine. The rental house was occupied by a lovely family with 2 well-behaved teenagers who actually asked permission before using the community dock for fishing. My own dock had become something of a local landmark. Tour boats would occasionally point it out as the site of the famous hot tub incident, and I'd get the occasional selfie seeker asking to pose by my sign. But mostly it was peaceful. Exactly the way I'd always wanted it. The viral fame had an unexpected benefit. Property owners around the country started reaching out for advice on dealing with entitled neighbors. I found myself becoming an unofficial consultant on boundary disputes and creative problem solving. My standard advice remained the same: try communication first. Document everything. Set clear boundaries. And remember that sometimes the best consequences are the ones that nature provides. Sitting on my dock 2 years later, watching the same sunset that Carol and Harper had tried to claim as their backdrop, I reflected on the whole experience. The hot tub incident had taught me something important about human nature. Some people genuinely don't understand boundaries until they experience consequences. No amount of reasoning, pleading, or official complaints would have worked with Carol and Harper. They only understood power and entitlement. But physics? Physics doesn't care about your attitude. Water doesn't negotiate. Gravity doesn't make exceptions for entitled behavior. Sometimes the most elegant solution to a human problem is to step back and let the natural world provide the lesson. The lake had been my teacher as much as theirs. It had shown me that patience, preparation, and a little creative thinking could solve problems that seemed impossible through conventional means. My dock was still there, still strong, still mine. The sign had weathered beautifully and served as both a warning and a conversation starter. And every morning when I stepped outside with my coffee, I was greeted by the sound of gentle waves and singing birds instead of bubbling hot tubs and entitled laughter. The internet had made me briefly famous, but that wasn't why I'd done it. I'd done it because my sanctuary had been violated by people who thought their temporary desires mattered more than my permanent rights. In the end, justice had been served not by courts or lawyers or police, but by the simple laws of physics and the persistent current of a quiet lake. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just letting nature take its course with a little help from an unplugged generator and a loosened rope. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, the whole world gets to watch entitled people learn that actions have consequences, even if those consequences come floating by in a hot tub they never should have stolen in the first place. The lake was quiet again. The dock was mine. And somewhere out there, Carol and Harper were hopefully learning to ask permission before using other people's property. But probably not. Some people never learn. And that's why stories like this exist, to remind the rest of us that boundaries matter, respect matters, and sometimes the most satisfying justice is the kind that nature provides all by herself. What would you have done in my situation? How do you handle entitled neighbors who won't listen to reason? Share your stories in the comments below, because apparently, we all have a Carol and Harper story waiting to be told.